Legal research and writing. I got this very interesting email a couple days ago. There's a lot of stuff about The Hobbit, which I love. Okay, so here's the question. One thing I'd like for KidCools to offer is an LRAW section, legal research and writing. I and practically everyone I know in my class is struggling with how to write memos, effectively research, etc. A lot of Lord of the Rings references here to keep the reference of it's like Frodo and Sam following Gollum into Mordor. I don't know if that makes me Gollum, and like I'm secretly a two-faced bad guy. Okay, but maybe I'm the guy. Okay, awesome. Or maybe she met her professors. Anyway, it's so different than all the other courses, but also extremely important for doing well in real life. And I haven't been able to find a comprehensive guide on how to do well, nor any practice exercises. That's all for now. Love, Lord of the Ring lover. Okay. I have, and I've given some advice on this in the past, but most of it has been of this ilk. Don't sweat it. I do have some pretty concrete tips on how to deal with legal research and writing. But I do want to come back and emphasize this. Legal research and writing fits into a bigger picture, and it has to be kept in its place. I could be wrong about this, but generally, in a lot of places, legal research and writing is pass-fail, and if that's the case, don't think about it very much at all. Even if it is graded, it's maybe 10% of your GPA, but it can totally kill your time to prepare for exams. And part of the problem is, and I should have put these bullets in reverse order, a lot of people fall for the I can work until I get an A fallacy. That is, even if it's a graded class, it's not really clear to you a lot of the first semester what you need to do well on exams, but it does seem really concrete to you how you could potentially excel in legal writing. So you put a lot of work into that class and you skimp on the future because you don't yet know what it takes to do well in your substantive classes. So, you know, it's important to remember that there can be a trade-off between how well you do in LRAW and your substantive classes. Okay, you've got to be strategic. You only have so much time, and you're going to spend that time where it matters on your substantive classes. So let's say you bomb LRAW, or say get a flat B or something like that. Please believe me, as someone who's been on the hiring end of things, and employers care a lot more about whether or not you get A's in your actual classes, because it's much harder to do that than if you get an A in LRAW and then just hit the mean with the other classes. You won't stand out, and you'll have spent a lot of time. Maybe you'll have gotten 1A, but you'll have ruined your GPA overall. Totally true. Yes, LRAW is important for real life, but let's step back. The skills that LRAP or LRAW introduces you to are super important in life. Do not think that a year of a couple hours a week of legal research and writing will teach you how to practice law. It's a start. It takes, frankly, years to get really good at writing briefs and memos. It's something that you can tell the difference immediately between a brief written by first or second year right out of law school and someone who's more senior. It takes a long time to get good at these things. LRAW is a start, and you're gonna dip your toes into writing briefs and memos and stuff, whether or not you pour a lot of time into it or just the bare amount necessary. So on to concrete advice. Haha, just kidding. Before I do that, this isn't a transcript. This is someone who answered one of my surveys. It's someone who went to Northwestern Law. But look at this transcript. It's utterly beautiful. A plus, and B plus in legal writing. Overall, 1L GPA is like, you round up and it's a 4.0. People don't do this. This is not a big deal. The reverse, B plus is straight across, and even an A plus in legal writing will not get you a job anywhere. So chill out about legal writing. All right. Now, here come, given the time that you have, let's say that you accept my premise and that you're only going to spend the amount of time that you really have to do this. This is how you can save yourself some time. Okay. Let's assume that before you start writing, you got to do some legal research. A lot of the assignments are clear. Do research on this area of law and then write a legal memo telling me what to do, or write a brief convincing me of one position or another. A lot of you are given Westlaw or Lexis passwords. Totally dangerous, because you start typing in search terms and running off to find cases as if it were Google. It's not. And that's a rough way. Almost no practicing lawyer I know starts by just typing in, sex toy law into Westlaw or Lexis to figure out a given area of law. You use treatises, okay? And I've told you about treatises in other lessons. They are publications that actually structure and summarize the case law. Now, the older ones are like Blackstone's, the book that Abe Lincoln studied from, but there are a ton of different treatises that are focused on specific substantive areas of law. And funny enough, Westlaw and Lexis, and I need somebody to verify because I haven't been a student in a while, generally give you access to a lot of different treatises. Wright and Miller is a treatise. Miller being the Arthur Miller, formerly of Harvard, and Miller's Court. People have write books that set out the case law so that you know roughly what the black letter law is. This is something that I emphasize in issue spotting, but it's something that's really useful when you do research. Don't just spin your wheels and start reading a bunch of cases. Find the treatises, or you can start that way. Start with something that you know is relevant, and Westlaw will automatically, in a different column, show you what the secondary sources are that you can use to do sharper research. You won't have to figure out the contours of the law yourself. You use a treatise, which I generally recommend that you not study from for purposes of class because it's way too detailed. But for purposes of writing a brief or a legal memo, you will need that level of precision, and a treatise can rapidly clarify the law for you in a way that just searching a bunch of cases will not. You'll just chase your tail endlessly until you get exhausted. Okay, I'm going to show you what it looks like. Okay, so let's say we've got a case. I've blanked it out, and if Westlaw is somehow related to Big Brother, I don't claim this is fair use. I'm not claiming that I own Westlaw. Okay, so you've got a case here, all right? A lot of times you've got this view in this column here, and it links to other cases that cite to this. These are the citing references that cite a particular case, okay? There's a column called secondary sources. So let's back up, okay? I just said don't do a bunch of case law research, but a lot of the times you'll be given a case or two to kind of start your sourdough bread. If you get that analogy, raise your hand. You'll be given a case, some kind of starting point. So maybe start there in Westlaw or Lexis and see the secondary sources that it cites. That should point you to a treatise that lays out the law a lot more clearly. So it'll look like this. You click in the secondary sources, okay? Secondary sources will pull up a ton of things. You can use a law review article that may well summarize a given area of law well, but maybe you have to poke around to find one that's good. What's better is something like the Law of Torts or consumer credit and the law, something that describes the area, Prosser on torts, Miller on Civ Pro. And Westlaw will link to a very specific section of that treatise, which will generally in Lexis or Westlaw be a standalone document. Okay. Click on those and find ones that'll help you. A lot of the times when you click into something like American Law of Torts, there is somewhere where you can find a table of contents for that treatise. It's a little bit harder to look for treatises that may be relevant for you, but you can also start that way in Westlaw, and I wish I prepared that for you this evening. But from the kind of main page, you can kind of skip the bank for cases and go directly to secondary sources. Okay, then you'll get something like this. This is a treatise-looking type thing. Consumer credit in the law. TILA defines unauthorized as ... So it'll jump right in and tell you what the law is, and the footnotes will generally be citations to statutes, regulations, other articles, and more importantly, case law that'll help you do research, faster research for your memos than you might otherwise do. Now, I tend to think that a lot of the time you're not told about these things because there aren't always treatises for the work that you do. That's okay. And it's okay that your legal writing instructors want you to be able to start from scratch where there are no treatises. Fine. But if you're really killing yourself in hours, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. Use a treatise, understand the law quickly, grab other sites from the treatises that might be relevant, do follow-up research on those cases. Don't just grab them and think that your job is done, but this is a way to find relevant cases a lot faster so that you're not just going on and on forever. Okay. Now you turn to drafting once you've collected some cases. Do two things. I wish I'd split this up. If I'd been given more time, I would have organized this better, but whatever. Do something called time boxing. Strictly limit the amount of time you spend on your first draft. Don't polish or edit. Write bad words in it if you want to. Get it on paper. It's the most important thing rather than writing lines and hoping that they'll be perfect. They'll suck no matter what the first time you do it. So let yourself do a first draft. There are two things in your mind: the right hemisphere that creates and makes, and the left that's a little more analytical and says everything sucks. The left-hand side of the brain that says everything sucks is important for later, but if there's too much back and forth with the drafting and the critical part of you, it'll move slowly. Just get the draft out. Time boxing works by something called Parkinson's law, where it's like the work will fill hours that you give it. If you give yourself 2 weeks to write something, you're going to procrastinate and it's not going to be better. Write something fast, get it on paper, make it sucky, and then polish. That's the next part. Iterate in drafting. Review the draft with fresh eyes, not right after you draft it. Give yourself enough time so you can sleep on it. You can pick it up and really look at it and completely empathize with the reader. If you edit right after you write, you tend to still be in the frame of mind where you're talking to yourself. You're like, oh, I know what I'm thinking. If you sleep, you forget what you're thinking and you're left with what you've actually put on the page. And you're much more in the shoes of someone who, say, your legal writing instructor reads it for the first time, isn't in your head, and goes, I have no idea what this person is saying. Okay? So time box, get that first draft done, just get it out of the way, and iterate. Review it with fresh eyes at least a couple of times. In doing so, poke holes in your own argument or analysis, and then fill the holes with logic, with first first principles type arguments, or do more legal research. Do that. Okay? Now, here's another shortcut in terms of drafting, say, a brief that's due. Westlaw often links to briefs. If you have a given case, a lot of the time, because legal materials are open to the public generally, unless people file for them to be protected, Westlaw and Lexis grab briefs that are relevant to different cases. So sometimes you can look at a brief in an area that you're trying to write a brief on, and this is another actual practitioner's tip. You, again, don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can see what someone else has written on something similar. So basically, you get on the Westlaw or Lexis. I keep saying Westlaw because most legal professionals use Westlaw. There are some things that Lexis is useful for, but this is your default. You look for cases that are relevant. You look for the briefs associated with the relevant cases. Now, what do you do when you're drafting? You don't just copy them, okay? You use them for inspiration. You learn how to word different parts of the law using the briefs. You can see how it's structured. You can try and follow it. Don't outright copy it, okay? There's your school has an honor code and you'll fail that way. And it's a lot more of a pain in the ass to get kicked out of law school or to have something weird on the transcript saying that you copy stuff, plagiarism. Everyone, it just came up with a horrible metaphor, so I'll just pass on that. One thing that may be hard, though, is briefs are just briefs. Doesn't mean that they're always well written. This is a terrible rule of thumb in real life, but do try to, and maybe you don't know the names of big law firms, but if there are a lot of briefs that you can look at, try to use briefs from kind of brand name law firms, from AmLaw 100 law firms, from Chambers Guide law firms. Real lawyers do this. I've done this in actual cases. Sometimes you find something that helps. Sometimes you find something that isn't exactly on point, but does the same thing as a treatise and sets out a lot of the law that's helpful to you. Don't fail to actually read the cases, because briefs are supposed to faithfully restate what's in a case, but they do spin. You have an obligation to zealously advocate on behalf of your clients, so the briefs will spin as much as they need to create a good position for their clients. So read the cases. Okay. I copied it again. Yeah, iterate. Okay. So let's go back. What do you do in the legal research and writing? First of all, you don't sweat it. You don't allocate more time, any more time than you absolutely have to. And what you absolutely have to do in legal writing is a lot less than probably your first instinct as a good, diligent student would tell you to. Okay? Don't forget that you can use Westlaw or Lexis as a shortcut to doing research. Use treatises, use briefs to find the law, relevant law, and understand it more quickly than you otherwise would just hunting and pecking through cases. Okay? You can use a model brief to kind of emulate. It's a model, don't copy it. You time box, you strictly limit the amount of time that you spend writing, and you just bang out that first draft, and then you iterate, and you do any of these other things again if necessary. Okay. Let me stop there. Any questions on that? I'm going to take a sip of my decaf. Okay. Moving on.